Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and it's week 6. It's time to look for some more players to add to our rosters. The bye weeks have come already, starting last week, and of course, the injuries never stop coming at us constantly, so we've got to be shuffling players around, making moves to stay relevant in fantasy football to help you get all the right players on your roster. DBRO, Derek Brown, the King of Bros, and of course, my patty cakes, Patty Fitzmaurice. We are all here today to help you get those names onto those teams. And I am so happy this morning, D-Bro. You know, all week I manifested it, as the kids like to say, the Sam Darnold game. And, you know, I heard a story Sam Darnold tell about how he, you know, played linebacker in high school just so he could play on the varsity team because there were other quarterbacks ahead of him. That guy's just a football player. And I'm so happy that he went to London and did what he did to the Jets. And good for you, kid. I love a good comeback story, D. I really do.
It's wonderful, man. And the purple haze is real. Brian Flores continues to rip the league a new one. And it's wonderful, man. Watching how good the Vikings are right now. Sorry, Pat. Which seems to be a consistent theme of this show. It's great, man. I love to see the comeback story. Very curious about, we'll get to that backfield, what happens in the upcoming weeks, though.
Yeah, Aaron Jones situation. We'll talk about that today. And a lot of other ones, too, because there's a lot of other RB injuries, some maybe short-term, so we got to be really careful how we spend that fab, some maybe a little long-term. And Pat, you know, again, you see today, no Viking stuff. I didn't do it today.
I had to double check. I just double check for purple here.
No sweatshirts, no t-shirts, no long sleeves. I got nothing here. Pat, you know, is feeling better this week. His Green Bay Packers got a W, and you know, again, it was a tough week there too for the Brewers, and I don't want to I was rubbing it in with the Vikings, and then I don't want to do more because my Mets beat the Brewers and stuff like that. So it's a tough week for Pat. But like last week in my office,
I feel like you're setting him up.
Well, no, because last week in my office it was kind of, you know, hot in here. Now it's a little cold, so my hat, you know, I got to put a hat on because head's getting a little.
There we go. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it was coming. I knew it.
This is an old hat. I don't know where I got this one out of the closet last minute before the show here.
Bill busted the lead up too much. I knew something was coming.
Well, the good news for you, Joe, is that whoever knocks the Brewers out of the playoffs is usually propelled into the World Series. So good omen for your Mets.
It is. I saw that. Let's get back to football, though. Everyone's like, what the hell is baseball? Let's start with the waiver wire ad of the week. Before we do, let's give away something else here on the channel. Trophy Smacks, large fantasy football wall smack. It's gone. We've given it away. The winner is Matthew Cowley. Matthew, congratulations. Get in touch with us at customer support at mailbag@fantasypros.com with your mailing address and proof of your subscription to the Fantasy Bros YouTube channel, and we'll get that shipped to you right away. Again, Matthew Cowley, you're the big winner. Congratulations. The wall smack is yours. And that means we got to give something else away. And we've got another belt. That's right. Trophy Smacks Ultimate 6-pound custom championship belt can be yours. If you missed this one a couple weeks ago, this is your second chance at glory, just like Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings. This massive, fully customizable belt is the perfect way to show off your fantasy football title. And of course, you can get it customized for you. So if you want to enter, all you have to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Bros YouTube channel, drop your comments below, and ring the bell till it goes ding for notifications so you know if you are the big winner of this incredible 6-pound custom championship belt from our good pals over at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for all of your football and fantasy rings, trophies, you name it, loser awards, they've got it. Let's get to the big dog of the week, and it's a running back, which is good. We've got some running back names to talk about this week, which is very nice. Well, we have to start with somebody that Derek Brown was a year early on. I heard a lot of Tank Bigsby stuff last year in the summer from Derek Brown, and then I didn't see a lot of Tank Bigsby in 2023. However, we've seen more of him this year, and he looks explosive. And the Jaguars, you know, Travis Etienne could be on his way out at some point. Tank Bigsby, 31% rostered, and this is a guy we've been talking about for weeks now. I was shocked at this roster percentage. 31% rostered. 13 attempts yesterday, 101 rushing yards, not one, but 2 touchdowns. So, D-Bro, how does it feel to watch Tank Bigsby sort of emerge now as this up-and-coming fantasy RB?
It's been awesome to watch, guys. And really, the reason I was so big into him last year and looking at the collegiate profile is his tackle breaking metrics. He was awesome at the breaking tackles, and we've seen this year. He's been explosive every time they've given him the ball. And we've talked about him on how many different weeks, guys, how many weeks in a row, and yet the roster percentage still stays at this level. But after this week, it's not going to. But yeah, man, it's fantastic to watch him on a per touch basis, and people need to go out there and spend for him, because not only did he have the monster week, he outsnapped Travis Etienne, he split the goal line work with him, and he outsnapped him in short yardage work. So, Joe, as you like to say, the worm is turning in this backfield, and it's not in favor of Travis Etienne.
It's not. Etienne will be somewhere else next year, will be my guess. And, that makes sense. Or even this year at some point, if they end up trading him to another team. Pat, when you look at what Bigsby did yesterday and what we've been talking about for weeks, which is he is one of the more valuable handcuffs or valuable RB2s, because if something should happen to Etienne, he would get elevated into immediate RB2, maybe even low-end RB1 at this juncture in the season status. I was shocked after so many of those discussions we had, even just last week we had this discussion, that the roster percentage hadn't really moved. Pat, were you equally surprised?
I was surprised, Joe. And the nice thing about Tank Bigsby is there's some standalone value here. I mean, there has not been a lot of fruit to pick from the running back vine on waivers so far this year. It's been kind of disappointing in that regard. Tank Bigsby has standalone value right now. People were throwing a lot of money at Braylon Allen. We saw it with the London game this week. Not a lot of standalone value with Braylon Allen, and he can absolutely get game scripted out. So anyone who started him this week was down in the dumps for sure. Now, Tank Bigsby's profile isn't perfect. There are some blemishes here. He is not very useful as a pass catcher. He's got 2 receptions in 22 NFL games. It's not like he can't do it. He had 30 receptions in his final college season at Auburn, but they just don't use him that way. And I think that's why Travis Etienne isn't going to go away entirely. And with that sort of profile, you can get game scripted out if the Jaguars fall behind and get behind 2 or 3 scores. And here's the bad news. The Jaguars are a below average team. So that might happen to you some weeks. So good offenses are able to consistently parcel out 25 to 30 carries a game to whoever is sharing the backfield. Jaguars aren't necessarily going to have that, but I don't want to be a total wet blanket here, Joe, because it does look like Travis or Tank Bigsby is probably going to be getting double-digit carries most weeks. And that is a good thing because a lot of people need running back help. To anyone who's struggling at running back right now, Tank Bigsby looks like manna from the heavens. So there are going to be some big expenditures this week. I think we're going to see probably some 50%, 60% fab bids for the Tank. We're not condoning that, but that's the reality of it.
Yeah. I mean, we once lived in a world where that happened with Isaiah Likely, so I wouldn't be surprised for Tank Bigsby.
Well, it happened last week with Dontavian Wicks in a league we're in at $67. That did not work out so well, unfortunately, for the manager who did that one in our league. But, I get that, and I think it's very tantalizing to see when he has these big performances, too, that is possible. And if something, down the stretch should happen and Bigsby ends up being just the standalone guy there, that's extremely valuable in a playoff scenario. So I get aggressiveness, over-aggressive. Pat giving you some good reasons maybe to just understand maybe there is a little bit of downside there too. So good conversation with Tank Bigsby, but certainly a guy that 31% is just not enough. I mean, that's just absurd that we were in that range. Let's talk about some more running backs. Before we do, real quick reminder, everybody, the roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. So if you're ready to place your first bet, try betting on something simple, like a player to score a TD. It's one of my favorite things to do. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, make your pick, and you can score big with DraftKings Sportsbook. Again, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use the promo code FantasyPros. That's promo code FantasyPros, and new customers get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's talk about somebody who had not 1, but 2 touchdowns yesterday, and now has 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. It's Roschon Johnson. So we continue to see the same old story. DeAndre Swift does the work, and then somebody else usually gets in the end zone. Now, look, Swift did get a touchdown yesterday too, but Again, maybe it's in standard leagues only where we're considering him at this point, Roschon, but he is 32% rostered. He is getting that opportunity down there. So, Pat, what do you make of Roschon's status here, and how excited or unexcited are you about adding him? What are the prospects for Roschon?
Somewhat unexcited. He should be rostered as a depth piece. There's absolutely contingent value here if anything happens to DeAndre Swift, because Khalil Herbert has fallen by the wayside. Roschon is at least clearly the number 2 running back in Chicago. And he does have, it looks like, the goal line duties, which is good. So if you are forced to start him, there's at least a path to value with his touchdown potential. But he's the clear number 2 running back in an offense that's average at best. So I don't want to spend a lot for that. Like, I don't know if you get reliable standalone value. This looks something like the Braylon Allen profile, and I don't think any of us think Roschon is as good as Braylon Allen.
No, like the Braylon Allen thing, actually, it's funny now that we've mentioned it twice. I think that's almost to the Jets' detriment that they have gone away from him a little bit. Because when the Jets' offense looked the best, is the 2 games that they got W's, right? When they were actually using Braylon Allen back-to-back weeks against the Titans, and then in that Thursday night football game, right? And they've kind of gotten away from that a little bit and keep asking Aaron Rodgers to do a little bit more. And I don't think that's working for the New York Jets necessarily right now. Roschon, for you, DBRO, I agree with Pat. He's a guy that should be rostered. He's a good depth piece, a good insurance policy, break glass situation on DeAndre Swift managers as well. So if you are somebody that has Swift, are you more apt to get Roschon just to keep that in your back pocket here as we go, getting closer and closer to the second half of the season?
Yeah, and I mean, I think there are ways where it's pretty easy to see that we can make the Braylon Allen comparison. We can even make he's the dollar store Tank Bigsby version of like 2 weeks ago, where not much pass game involvement. He's getting only early downs. He's the definitive backup, but we see him getting the goal line work. So either way it goes, like, I agree that he's in that handcuff phylum, but again, this is being ahead of the curve. If anything happens to Swift, Roschon would be the bell cow? Because like you said it, Joe, Khalil Herbert's non-existent here.
Done,
so
Pat, and I agree on that too.
This is kind of like the early Tank Bigsby corollary where we had 2-3 weeks ago, but Chicago has a better defense. So even though the offense is not that great, they're probably going to be in more positive games, Chris.
Pat, I want to thank you for that word of the day toilet paper that you bought, DBRO, because the words correlate and phylum just came out of his mouth in the same segment. Let's move on to some running backs that are kind of in the same cluster here, which is guys who got opportunities because of injuries yesterday ahead of them, but their suspect long-term value is something we need to evaluate. Tyrone Tracy of the Giants, 33% roster. Devin Singletary was out, 129 yards rushing for him. Jalen Wright, because of the Achane injury, got some opportunity. He looked pretty good there. He's only 20% rostered. Now it's a concussion for Achane, and then you have the bye week coming up here. So you would think that Achane would be back, but again, we can have that discussion too. Durability factor of Achane, is Jalen Wright the right guy? And then Ty Chandler, 36% roster with the Aaron Jones injury. So, DBRO, let's talk about Tracy, Wright, and Chandler. What's your priority of these three? Are these three guys that people should be chasing at all, or are they traps when it comes to the waiver wire this week?
I think people should be chasing Tracy and a little bit of a bid on Chandler. I'm not the biggest Ty Chandler stan, but I think Tracy, Chandler, and then Wright would be the correct order for me. Devin Singletary, I thought, but for most of the week was more not questionable, but doubtful, considering how limited he was in practice. So if he misses again this week, which I think it's possible, people need to be out there bidding on Tyrone Tracy, and I'm surprised his roster percentage is this low. It has to be the Giants stink. That's the only reason, because why else a guy that we knew was going to be the starter last week is only at 33% rostered, but he would get the Cincinnati Bengals this week. So this is the player, like we talked a lot about Tank Bigsby, but if you need somebody this week, this is the player to go spend that 12 to 15% if you are hurting at running back right now. Again, because look, we think maybe Devin Singletary is not even back this week. What if it lingers even longer with the groin issue? So I think Tracy's the big spend here, and then tossing $1 or $2, maybe 5% at Ty Chandler, because we just don't know about Aaron Jones' hip injury right now. Now, again, with the same correlation to Jalen Wright, they have the bye week coming up. So even if the injury is not, say, substantive, but he has time to recover, Ty Chandler still would be the starting running back, but he would come out of the bye facing arguably one of the best run defenses in the NFL against the Lions. So if it's only 1 week of viability, I'm not going to overspend for Ty Chandler.
Pat, I saw you nodding in agreement when Derek gave his order and his approach, so I'm only guessing that you kind of see things the same way, where it's Tracy and then a little bit of Chandler and then Jalen Wright. Well, deep league or Jalen Wright, if you have a Chan maybe.
Completely agree with the order, Tracy, Chandler, Wright. And Tracy, so if it is a groin injury for Singletary, that's probably a 2 or 3 week injury. So I would suspect that Singletary is probably on the wrong side of questionable for this week. And so Tracy, plus I love that you get dual run catch value from Tracy. Just like this, a crazy explosive athlete. Like he was a favorite sleeper in dynasty rookie drafts this year because of his athleticism. He has a background as a pass catcher. He was a wide receiver at Iowa before he transferred to Purdue for the end of his college career. So really versatile and athletic, interesting talent for sure. And if you need a starter for week 6, chances are he is going to be the lead back in an offense that should look even better if Malik Neighbors comes back. And the Chandler situation is interesting. Maybe it is a hip thing with Aaron Jones, but I heard there was at least one Twitter doc, my buddy Dr. Edwin Porras, who suggested maybe it was a groin adductor type of injury, which could be, those are usually 2 to 3 week things. So no guarantee that Aaron Jones is ready to go when the Vikings come out of their week 6 bye. So might be able to get a discount on Chandler in waivers because of the bye. Like people are often reluctant to pick up a player who they won't be able to use right away. Maybe you can sneak him through for $2 or $3 and have a week 7 starter. And I don't know. I mean, with Chan, yeah, if it's a concussion and they have a bye this week, he's probably going to be good to go. I'm not as high on Jalen Wright as some other people are. I think even if something happened to Chan, I don't know if they give him that lead role or if they mix him in with Mostert and maybe Jeff Wilson. So not going to be bidding on Jalen Wright in any of my fab runs this week.
Make a great point, Pat, which was, when you have these bye week players, like they perform and then all of a sudden they're on a bye, sometimes people don't even go after them. So keep that in mind. Be smart, be prepared, get ahead of the game a little bit, because some of these stashes, as long as your roster can handle it, now you have to look at your roster and see how many players you need to sit because of your own buys that you have already. But if you can afford it, if you have a good week 6 that looks pretty clean, adding a guy like Chandler for a couple bucks makes a lot of sense there, because it could be a good long-term ad. Let's talk about making some room real quick for some of these other guys that we might want to add. We heard all the noise, Pat, about Ramondre Stevenson's not the starter. And I said the same thing. I lost my mind on the stream about this the other day. And I was like, guys, starter means nothing in the NFL. That's just some BS that people throw out there to motivate some guys. And maybe the first series doesn't go their way. But Antonio Gibson, droppable, Pat?
Yes, he is droppable. Oh. And we did get that vague messaging about the benching. Like you didn't know if that was just going to be like, okay, it's a ceremonial thing where he sits for the first series or two, or if, Gerard Mayo gets the Ron Rivera super glue and glues Ramondre Stevenson to the bench the way he used to glue Antonio Gibson to the bench when he used to fumble. That wasn't the case. We still saw a lot of Ramondre Stevenson. So, yeah, I mean, you can dump Antonio Gibson.
Follow the money, folks. Ramondre signed that huge extension. If you thought he was getting benched for this game, then you're crazy. That was the only player that they even have on offense, it feels like most of the time. So you're of that mind too, right? DBRO, drop Gibson. That's fine. Yeah, for those of you who picked him up going, I've got the new starter of the New England Patriots. No, you don't. No, you don't. Have you looked at the contract that Ramondre Stevenson just signed? No. Emmanuel Wilson. You want to drop him, DBRO? Is it time to move on from him?
Bye. Pat? Marshawn Lloyd will be back soon. Bye.
Agree.
Okay, there you go. All right, let's move on here to the wide receivers. Before we do, guys, did you watch that Vanderbilt-Alabama game? Because that was some wild stuff. You want to talk about letdown games. You want to talk about like amazing moments. And then the crowd carrying the goalpost through Broadway in Nashville. Now, we've been there, the three of us together. Mm-hmm. That was a scene, man. Carrying the goalpost through on a Saturday night. Unbelievable. And you could have been at that game, folks. That's where the Game Time app comes in. If you're looking to get college football tickets, NFL tickets, MLB playoff tickets, or even concert tickets, the Game Time app has you covered. And you want to be at these events because these things can happen. And you have these stories that you can tell everybody around the water cooler, tell your kids about, tell your grandkids about. at some point in time. And the Game Time app is a great way to get last-minute tickets, whether it's for sports, concerts, again, comedy shows, theater, you name it, they've got it. You can scroll through, see all the different shows they've got, and they've got the lowest price guaranteed, and they will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find something else that's better. So you take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app right now, create an account, use that promo code FantasyPros, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's $20 off. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account, redeem the code FantasyPros, FANTASYPROS, for $20 off. Again, download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. It's time to pick up some wide receivers now. Darnell Mooney did not make the original show because in Sleeper, he's rostered in 71% of leagues. So, I mean, if he's still out there, you don't need me to tell you to go get this guy. One of my favorite late pickups in leagues going into the season. These guys did enough mock drafts with me where I just kept picking Darnell Mooney because, well, somebody else has to catch a ball there. And Kirk Cousins, that guy's pretty good in primetime, boys. I got to say, he is one hell of a primetime quarterback. But on other sites, he is sometimes less than 50. So do your due diligence. Check out Darnell Mooney. You don't need us to tell you about what he's been doing. You see the stats yourself. If he's still out there, be aggressive. Darnell Mooney's part of this offense, and this is an offense you want to be a part of. Let's go to Darius Slayton, another guy who stepped up yesterday. 8 for 122 and a touchdown. DBRO, no Malik Neighbors. Slayton stepped up in a big way. Wan'Dale was kind of our guy, but the Slayton game, I think, is the one we got to talk about because he is free. He is 8% rostered. Mm-hmm. It feels like, though, Malik Neighbors comes back again, Slayton kind of goes into oblivion. Is it as easy as that and just don't even chase it?
Yeah, I'm not bidding on Slayton this week. That's exactly how I'm approaching this. Neighbors will be back. He's the 1. Wan'Dale's the 2. Darius Slayton, bye-bye. Back into nothingness.
Pat, the more we talk about this week, the more it feels like there's just giant traps of spending fab. And it feels every week in every season, obviously every season has a week like this, where there is one that just kind of stands out. You're like, ugh, I don't know. This kind of feels weird. And there's been a lot of big performances. Tracy, Slayton, Bigsby, right? Like Bigsby we love. That's good. But what about Slayton for you, Pat? Same thing, like Malik Neighbors comes back and he just becomes nothing again?
The worst mistake you can make in waivers, Joe, is chasing last week's points. And this picking up Darius Slayton this week would be a case of chasing last week's point. Malik Neighbors has been this ridiculously prolific target hog. And by the way, they have 2 target hogs here because Wan'Dale Robinson is getting a lot of targets too.
Yeah.
That does not leave much meat on the bone for Darius Slayton. His value is going to go up in a puff of smoke like a Vegas magic act, Joe.
What a beautiful imagery. And now I've learned something too. Number 1 thing not to chase, last week's waiver wire points. Number 2 thing not to chase, waterfalls. Let's go to another one, Jalen Tolbert. Now, this guy had some points. I kind of want to chase these, Pat, because Brandon Cooks is an older wide receiver. The Dallas Cowboys have their problems and issues. I think we can all agree on that. But here we go. We're here at this juncture in the season where Tolbert just 17% rostered. He feels like a guy to me that can continue to grow into a role where in these bye weeks, I find him as a viable starting option. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And DBRO sort of put me on him weeks ago. DBRO liked him, and this was even with Brandon Cooks around. I was a little worried. I just didn't think there was going to be much value there as long as Cooks was also drawing some targets. But now with Cooks on IR, you've got a team that is going to be very pass heavy because they do not have a strong running game. Rico Dowdle's useful game against the Steelers notwithstanding, not a high-powered rushing offense. So Dallas is going to throw a lot. And CeeDee Lamb is going to demand a lot of defensive attention. And sometimes Dak just likes to throw to the open guy. So I do think there's some value with Jalen Tolbert. Maybe it's like low-level wide receiver 3 flex value. But I think he can be a useful piece.
7 catches on 10 targets, 87 yards and a touchdown against Pittsburgh. No slouch of a defense. Weather not great either. Next week they get Detroit, then the bye. So again, if you need somebody to stream this week, it feels like Tolbert could be a good guy in a game with Detroit, which could get to a pretty high number of points.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to be picking up Tolbert, Michael Keaton. Definitely needs to be picked up for 4 to 6% probably of your budget. And again, Pat and I were talking about this into the wee hours of the morning, considering how late that game got over. But also to monitor, Tolbert got banged up towards the end, came back. Could be a groin issue. Again, like we're waiting on injury reporting on that, but something to monitor if you are picking up Tolbert. So while I think he is a guy to go out there and get, the matchup against Detroit is fantastic. They're giving up a ton of fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers, and that game's going to shoot out. Something to monitor as you're putting in bids for Tolbert.
He got hurt the play before the game-winning touchdown, and it looked like he lined up in the formation, and it looked like he wasn't going to be able to run. Mm-hmm. So they took that time out. Then he's back on the field and scores the game-winning touchdown.
So good. So good.
Big moment for sure. Let's talk about the Jets again because we can. Alan Lazard has 18 targets in the last 2 weeks. Had a touchdown against Minnesota yesterday. Again, maybe if you stick with the Breece Hall, Braylon Allen grouping, maybe a little bit better for the Jets record. Just saying. I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. But Alan Lazard, 47% rostered. Derek, the guy just continues to be one of these like flex wide receiver guys. Next couple of weeks, he gets Buffalo, Pittsburgh, New England. Are you picking him up?
I'm picking him up, and a lot of places already have him rostered because we've been talking about him for multiple weeks. But 2 to 3% of your fab, I think, is about right. I'm not going to spend more than that. One, the matchups upcoming are terrible. Buffalo is a really good secondary. Pittsburgh, okay. Could we see more targets his direction with Porter Jr. following Garrett Wilson? Same thing you could say about the Patriots and Christian Gonzalez. But this is also because we don't know where he's going to land in the Devontae Adams roulette wheel. So if he goes to the Jets, then Lazard is going to get dropped in the pecking order. So again, whether you want to talk about bad matchups, when you want to talk about what could happen as far as trades in the NFL, I don't want to overspend for Alan Lazard, but he has been super productive.
Pat, there's one guy I think I do almost want to overspend a little bit on, and it's Josh Downs, who is rostered in 53% of leagues right now. I thought that would have been a little higher. Another guy that we talked about last week and we've talked about before on the show. Yesterday, 12 targets, 9 catches for 69. Now, he didn't see the end zone. Granted, Joe Flacco was playing these last 2 weeks, the bulk of the snaps, right? So 82 yards 2 weeks ago against Pittsburgh. He's got Tennessee, Miami, Houston coming up on the docket the next 3 weeks. I know a lot of this is tough to project, Pat, because you don't know if it's Flacco or Richardson, depending on the health of Richardson. You have to imagine at some point they'll go back to him. However, regardless of that, give me your take on Downs' value, regardless of who is playing quarterback. And is it something we should be more aggressive on, or maybe not because of the unknown of the QB situation?
You said regardless of who is playing quarterback, Joe. We cannot separate that because that is an important variable here.
Like it,
yeah. So, and you should probably give Derek equal time after this because I think we're going to be at odds here, and I'm going to be at odds with you too, perhaps. I don't think people should chase Josh Downs. Here's the thing. So Downs missed the first 2 games of this season, and Richardson was knocked out early in week 4 and didn't play in week 5. So we only have a 1-game sample of Richardson and Downs playing together this year. And in the 1 sample we do have week 3, Downs had 5 targets, 3 catches, 22 yards. I think Josh Downs profiles as a sort of a slot possession receiver who needs target volume in order to have fantasy value. And since an Anthony Richardson offense is always going to be run heavy, I don't think Downs is going to get the sort of target volume he needs to be a guy you want to start in fantasy. And they are going to play Richardson. Like, it was a minor hip injury. There was some speculation he was going to be able to play in week 5. I don't think they're going to keep Joe Flacco in there just because they're playoff chasing. Like, the development of Anthony Richardson is too important to this franchise. And I just don't think Downs has that much value if he's tied to Richardson.
I want to go back to the preseason because the first buzz we heard out of camp of the Colts was Richardson and Downs, Richardson and Downs. Now, I know it's training camp, and I know we hear a lot of that noise sometimes, and it tends to just be white noise. But, Derek, let's play counterpoint to this for a second. Maybe Downs is just this guy that's emerging and starting to get it at this level. I know Alec Pierce had a big play, too, with Flacco yesterday, but that I'm definitely not chasing. When it comes to Downs, again, this could be a trap, just like some of these other players we were talking about. Pat gives a lot of solid reasons of why you should have hesitation potentially on Downs. What are some other takes on Downs here from you that you feel like maybe he's actually better than we realize?
I mean, he's been fantastic the last 2 weeks. You look at him, he's got a 28% target share. He's averaging 8.5 grabs and 75 receiving yards. And I don't know, I definitely understand the volume concerns that Pat brings up because those are real. But that type of target share in this offense, and a lot of the big plays have gone to Alec Pierce, have been to A.D. Mitchell. And so we're going to see regression. Like Pittman's going to have some big plays in this offense, and so is Josh Downs. Josh Downs' role is to continue to evolve. That first week back, his ADOT was only 1.8. So it was like all close to the line of scrimmage, gadgety stuff, design targets. I don't think that that's his role, because hasn't been his role the last 2 weeks. We've seen an operate at Joe Flacco. So he has gotten some work down the field. I think his role continues to evolve. And basically, he's earning the same amount of volume over the last 2 weeks as Michael Pittman. So if we think Michael Pittman has standalone value or has value as a wide receiver 3 in this offense, even with Anthony Richardson under center, then I would put the same type of value on Josh Downs, because he's drawing similar target volume to Michael Pittman. And if anything, the upcoming matchups, Tennessee is a tough matchup across the board, but Miami and Houston lean from a schematic standpoint in the direction of Josh Downs. They've allowed the 5th and 12th most PPR points per target to opposing slot wide receivers. So even in the iteration of this offense with Anthony Richardson, the number one wide receiver in those up to 2 of those 3 next upcoming matchups could be Josh Downs leading the way and not Michael Pittman.
Question. I know my answer, but I want to hear yours. Tolbert or Downs? Who would you rather have this week?
Ooh, Tolbert. It's Tolbert. Assuming full health, Tolbert.
Tolbert.
Okay, so that's 3 for 3 there on the Tolbert bandwagon. All right, just want to put that out there for the people too, because I know you hear some things, and then sometimes the last thing you hear is the thing that sticks in your head. But I want to bring it back to Tolbert for a moment. Pat, this guy's floating out there. I don't know if you care. JuJu Smith-Schuster. Now, we haven't seen Monday night tonight. Who knows what's going to happen here with these wide receivers? Mecole Hardman, some of these guys that are just leftovers from the years past. It's like they're going back in, and it's like the old Christmas decorations you get once a year, and you somehow put them up. I don't know. Pat, you want to chase JuJu at all? You think there's any volume there for him with the Kansas City Chiefs?
I'm intrigued just because who is maybe best fit to slide into that Rashee Rice role of the receivers on the Chiefs roster? It seems like it's JuJu. I just don't know if he can be anything close to the same JuJu we saw in Pittsburgh early in his career.
Fair enough. DBRO, anything to add on JuJu?
I think he's the Christmas string of lights that have 1 or 2 missing that you immediately toss in the trash can. I have no interest in JuJu Smith-Schuster.
He's the ornament that goes on the back of the tree that you had, and now you're kind of embarrassed you have it, but you still put it up because you're
stuck in the corner. He's hanging on the tree, but you don't want to show him off to anybody.
There you go. It's also time to look at the waiver wire for guys who got dropped in the last couple of weeks because of injury or buys and roster crunches. I found 2 that it was interesting. They were under 50% rostered. Quentin Johnston, one of the guys we wanted to add the last couple of weeks, 43% rostered, and Christian Watson. So Quentin Johnston, Christian Watson, both under 50% rostered. DBRO, who would you pick up of those 2 if they were floating out there on the waiver wire? Who's got more appeal?
Better offense, better talent, better quarterback. It's easily Christian Watson.
Same thing for you, Pat?
I agree. I mean, Watson is absolutely worth rostering. Dontavian Wicks is not going to marginalize Christian Watson. And I know people spent a lot of money on Dontavian Wicks this past week. Dontavian Wicks has some issues at the catch point. Like he is, it's funny we're talking about him in the same breath as Quentin Johnston here because Dontavian Wicks does sometimes have trouble bringing in balls that he should probably catch. So very talented player, but like Watson is absolutely going to have value when he comes back. I think this is a good time to get ahead of the curve and maybe add him to your roster cheaply.
There's a name for that Green Bay virus, Pat. It's called MVS syndrome.
Oh boy.
All right. Speaking of Packers, you want to drop Romeo Doubs, DBRO?
I'm not dropping him because I think he'll be back after this week. I'm willing to hold him on rosters.
But what does he do? He just runs routes. He doesn't do anything. He's good at running. That's it.
Well, again, we could call that the MVS syndrome. Running routes and getting wonderful.
Well, MVS get open, though. MVS could get by guys. That's, I think, the only difference.
I'm willing to hold him because, again, we've seen the wide receiver room kind of turn here, and different guys have different weeks, like as far as blow-up weeks. This is just a really valuable offense that, again, if we do see further injuries too, I think Doubs would have value and would be ascending. So not a player I'm willing to drop in a lot of leagues. But again, if there's Josh Downs, if there's Jalen Tolbert out there, yes, I would drop him for one of them.
All right. I'm not going to ask this of DBRO because I know it hurts his soul. So, Pat, Demarcus Robinson, can you drop him? Because I know the reasoning was good. Yeah. The reasoning was good here with Demarcus Robinson originally, but my guy Jordan Whittington, unfortunately, just blows his doors off in terms of talent. So, drop Demarcus Robinson, Pat?
Yeah, remember the term I used last week, Joel? Rams whack-a-mole receivers. That's what we're getting. And now the Rams go on by, and when they get back, they're probably going to have Cooper Kupp back. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I think Whittington sticks around a little bit, though. Las Vegas, when they come back from the bye, I think he's got one more good week in him.
He's going to be getting his Romeo Doubs calisthenics in, Joe. Cooper Kupp is back.
All right. Well, who knows how long that lasts for, though? Let's be honest. Let's go to the streamers of the week for week 6 of the NFL. Pat, let's start with you. Streaming QB is who?
Daniel Jones, who I thought played maybe one of the best games of his professional career in Seattle yesterday, going against a very flawed Cincinnati Bengals defense this week. And presumably is going to have Malik Neighbors back, only 9% rostered. And by the way, Joe, can I just add one thing about the quarterback position? This is a bad week for streaming quarterbacks.
Yes.
But it's not a bad week to plan ahead at the quarterback position, get ahead of the curve on maybe Tua Tagovailoa. And we can debate, we're not going to debate here whether Tua should come back or not, but it sounds like by all reports, he is likely going to be back in the lineup when he is eligible to come off IR in week 8. And maybe even if you want to throw a buck at Drake May, Joe, I know the passing numbers probably are not going to be pretty in this offense.
Offensive lineman at him first but before I start throwing money at him?
Drake May can run. This dude can run, and quarterbacks with rushing value.
And I need to.
Yeah. So anyway, just if people want to get ahead of the curve at quarterback, it's not a great week for streaming QBs, though.
No, it's not. And God help Drake May. He better be running. He better have those PF flyers on like Benny Rodriguez. D-Bro, give me a quarterback to stream.
If not, he's going to be seeing ghosts like Sammy Darnold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the guy I'm going to go with here is Derek Carr. And this all comes down to we've seen the Saints offense be explosive. Still have great weapons. And we just saw Kirko Chains rip the Buccaneers secondary apart. I'm not going to discount that Derek Carr could do it too.
All right, how about streaming tight end? Tight end's been a wasteland for pretty much everybody. And then, of course, the irony is everybody who probably sat likely after, just getting miserable, and then he scores a touchdown this week. Oh, good times. You got to love tight end in 2024, folks. It's been quite the roller coaster, but give me somebody you could stream this week, Derek.
Hey, we talked about Tucker Kraft. Life's good in some parts
sure
of the
nation.
Tucker
Kraft was the number one guy last week, and he did certainly perform up to expectations. No doubt about that.
Patty and I both loved him walking into the week. And I'll bring up Cade Otton because I think looking at the elevation of his role since week 3, getting almost a 20% target share, averaging almost 48 receiving yards per game, going against the Saints, who have allowed the highest yards per reception against tight ends and the 7th most receiving yards. He's definitely streamable. And if he gets a touchdown or the similar volume, flirts probably with tight end 1 value, considering the position this year.
Pat, week 6, give me a tight end to stream.
Oh, this name is not going to quicken any pulses, Joe, but the venerable Zach Ertz plays in a very good, souped-up Washington Commanders offense, and he's going against a Ravens defense that is top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position, only 31% rostered on Yahoo.
All right, let's go to a defense. Pat, who do you have?
Eagles against the Browns. Look, we saw the Washington Commanders just completely flummox the Cleveland Browns offense. The Browns barely had 200 yards of offense against the Commanders, one of the worst defenses in the league. The Eagles are going to be fresh and well rested off their bye. They are a good streamer for this week.
I don't think you see Deshaun Watson play next week. I just don't. I think it's Winston time.
He's digging his heels in, man. He's digging his heels in. I think they're going to run it back at least one more time.
I know. I think that's a giant mistake. I really do.
Horrible mistake.
He can't do this. He can't, just because you can't live in a mistake just because you spent a long time making it. That's like the worst thing you could possibly do, because it just continue to make it worse and worse and compound it, and you're never going to start to push forward.
That was very profound, Joe.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Welcome to my TED Talk, everybody. Moments of Zen on the Fantasy Pros podcast. Derek, give me a defense to stream this week. Anybody against the Patriots offense, I would assume. Works.
Yes. And I mean, just play whoever's starting against the Patriots. Drake May, Jacoby Brissett. They don't have an offensive line. They want to bench their best player. I mean, pick whatever narrative or reality you want to talk about. Yes. Play the Houston Texans against the Patriots.
I mean, whatever the total is for every game with the Patriots, I just look for the under and bet it every week, and it just keeps giving and giving and giving. All right, give me a kicker, Derek, to start this week.
No, Patty talked about playing the Eagles defense. We're going to have short fields for the offense, so Jake Elliott against the Browns.
Patty, kicker for the week?
I'm going to keep pounding the table for Austin Seibert of the Washington Commanders. Get a piece of this Commanders offense.
I listened to you in the one league where I have a kicker. I picked him up, and I was very glad that I did.
Yes. And only 16% rostered in Yahoo leagues right now. So Austin Seibert, widely available.
All right, let's get to the top waiver wire ads for the week. For those of you with the rolling waivers, Patty, give me your top 5 for week 6. Who are they?
Tank Bigsby for sure. And we'll list Darnell Mooney. If he's available, go out and get him. So he's number 2. Tyrone Tracy is number 3. Ty Chandler is number 4. And we'll slide in Roschon Johnson at number 5.
Okay, pretty RB heavy week for Fitzy. DBRO, top 5 for week 6.
Tank is number 1. Darnell Mooney, if he's out there, is number 2. Tyrone Tracy, 3. And I'm going to go a little bit more wide receiver heavy. Josh Downs, 4. Jalen Tolbert, 5. But again, those two, the order of those two depends on if you need to start one of these guys, if you're looking at full season. If it's start him this week, it's Tolbert over Downs. If it's full season, it's Downs over Tolbert.
All right, everybody, that's what the waiver wire looks like this week. If you need more help for the waiver wire, again, use the waiver assistant on My Playbook, fantasypros.com/myplaybook. That's the place to go and sync your leagues for free. Set your lineups in one spot. Let the tools help you be the best fantasy player you possibly can. And bye weeks are tough, man. That's going to help you look ahead to use My Playbook. Again, download the app or go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and check out all the waiver wire write-ups that the team is doing at fantasypros.com right now. We've got the ranks. We've got the articles up there. We've got everything. So no excuses. Get the right players and keep winning in week 6. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Pat Fitzmaurice and DBRO, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.